In his 2024 year-end report, conservative U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts issued a stark warning. The United States' system of checks and balances is being eroded when federal court rulings are blatantly disregarded. Yet just weeks after Donald Trump returned to the White House, the former president and his allies, including Vice President J.D. Vance, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, and SpaceX and SCOTUS Tesla X.com CEO Elon Musk, launched a scathing attack on federal judges who temporarily blocked some of Trump's executive orders. Musk went so far as to call for their impeachment by Congress. This brazen defiance of judicial authority has raised alarms about the stability of the U.S. legal system and the role of the Supreme Court in enabling such behavior. In a February 18th article for Salon, journalist Sabrina Heike argues that Trump's contempt for the federal judiciary and legislative branches is a direct consequence of the Supreme Court's recent rulings, particularly those under Chief Justice John Roberts' leadership. Heike contends that Roberts and the conservative majority court have emboldened Trump by granting him unprecedented legal immunity and failing to uphold the constitutional boundaries of presidential power. This analysis delves into the implications of the Supreme Court's decisions, the erosion of checks and balances, and the potential long-term consequences for American democracy. The Supreme Court's role in undermining checks and balances. The U.S. Constitution establishes a system of checks and balances designed to prevent any single branch of government from becoming too powerful. The judiciary, as an independent branch, plays a critical role in interpreting the law and ensuring that the executive and legislative branches operate within their constitutional limits. However, Heike argues that the Roberts Court has increasingly undermined this system by siding with executive overreach and granting presidents broad immunity from legal accountability. In 2024, the Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in Trump versus the United States, a 6-3 decision that declared presidents enjoy absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts, but not for unofficial ones. This decision, authored by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, effectively shielded Trump from prosecution for actions taken during his presidency, even if those actions were widely viewed as abuses of power. The ruling sparked immediate controversy, with Justice Sonia Sotomayor in a blistering dissent, warning that it would encourage future presidents to act with impunity. Sotomayor went so far as to suggest that, under the court's reasoning, a president could assassinate a political rival without facing legal consequences. Heike argues that this decision has emboldened Trump to challenge the authority of federal courts and disregard constitutional guardrails. By granting Trump immunity from criminal prosecution, she writes, the Roberts Court has effectively invited him to do his worst, a challenge Trump is embracing with drool on his chin. The ruling, she contends, has not only weakened the judiciary's ability to check executive power, but also set a dangerous precedent for future administrations. Trump's defiance of federal courts. Since returning to the White House, Trump has wasted no time testing the limits of his newfound immunity. Within weeks of taking office, he issued a series of executive orders aimed at dismantling key government institutions and consolidating power within the executive branch. When federal judges temporarily blocked some of these orders, Trump and his allies responded with a barrage of attacks on the judiciary. Elon Musk, a vocal Trump supporter, called for the impeachment of federal judges who ruled against the administration. Vice President J.D. Vance accused the courts of judicial activism, while White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt dismissed their rulings as politically motivated. This coordinated assault on the judiciary represents a direct challenge to the rule of law and the principle of judicial independence. Hark notes that Trump's defiance of federal courts is part of a broader pattern of authoritarian behavior. Trump's authoritarian rule disregards both constitutional guardrails and federal statutes. She writes, "Limitations on power would irritate any aspirant dictator for life, and Trump is no exception. By attacking the judiciary, Trump seeks to undermine its legitimacy and consolidate power within the executive branch, a move that threatens the very foundation of American democracy." Complicity hack places much of the blame for this crisis on Chief Justice John Roberts and the conservative majority Supreme Court. She argues that the court's recent rulings, particularly Trump versus the United States, have emboldened Trump to challenge the authority of federal courts and disregard constitutional limits on executive power. The Roberts Court has consistently sided with executive overreach, she writes, undermining the system of checks and balances and eroding the judiciary's ability to act as a check on presidential power. Roberts, who has long portrayed himself as a defender of the judiciary's independence, has faced criticism for failing to uphold this principle in practice, while he has occasionally broken with his conservative colleagues on high-profile cases, such as upholding the Affordable Care Act. He has largely supported rulings that expand executive power and limit judicial oversight. This trend, Harke argues, has reached its apex in Trump versus the United States, which she describes as a green light for presidential abuse. The ruling has also raised questions about the court's commitment to the rule of law. By granting Trump immunity from criminal prosecution, the court has effectively placed the president above the law, a move that undermines the principle of equal justice under the law and sets a dangerous precedent for future administrations. One wonders whether the court will use one of the many pending cases to delimit its immunity ruling. Harke writes, or will appease Trump to avoid a clash, thereby threatening the separation of powers and its own authority. The broader implications for American democracy, the erosion of checks and balances, poses a grave threat to American democracy. By undermining the judiciary's ability to act as a check on executive power, the Roberts Court has enabled Trump to consolidate power within the executive branch and disregard constitutional limits on his authority. This trend, if left unchecked, could lead to a further erosion of democratic norms and the rise of authoritarianism. Hayek warns that Trump's actions are part of a broader pattern of authoritarian behavior. Staying in office permanently is a goal Trump has often repeated, she writes, a goal he tried to enforce through violence on January 6, 2021. She notes that Trump's defiance of federal courts and disregard for constitutional guardrails are consistent with his broader efforts to undermine democratic institutions and consolidate power. The implications of this trend extend beyond Trump's presidency. By granting presidents broad immunity from legal accountability, the Roberts Court has set a dangerous precedent that could embolden future administrations to act with impunity. This, in turn, could lead to a further erosion of democratic norms and the rise of authoritarianism in the United States. Conclusion: a call to action. Harke's analysis serves as a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked executive power and the erosion of checks and balances. She argues that the Roberts Court's complicity in enabling Trump's authoritarian behavior represents a grave threat to American democracy and calls for urgent action to restore the judiciary's independence and uphold the rule of law. The stakes could not be higher, she writes. If the judiciary fails to act as a check on executive power, the United States risks descending into authoritarianism. The time to act is now. By holding the Roberts Court accountable and reaffirming the principle of judicial independence, Hake argues, Americans can protect their democracy and ensure that the rule of law prevails. In the face of this crisis, the question remains, will the Supreme Court rise to the occasion and defend the Constitution, or will it continue to enable the erosion of checks and balances? The answer will determine the future of American democracy.